Some intriguing new details now to add to the ongoing investigation into former President Donald Trump and 2020 election interference in the state of Georgia. For the first time, we're now seeing text messages between operatives working with Trump's legal team. In those texts, they're trying to figure out what to do with data from a breached voting machine and if they should or could use that information to try to decertify Georgia's Senate runoff back in 2021. There's a lot to sort out here. CNN's Zach Cohen and Sarah Murray join us with this new reporting. Zach, just walk us through what you've learned and where it fits.
Hey John, these are two guys that we know were working directly with Trump's legal team, including people like Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani, and they were really tasked with finding evidence of voter fraud, right, that could be used in lawsuits, that could be used to sort of discredit the presidential results. But we're learning for the first time now that after January 6th, after everything that happened that day, that hunt continued, and they did successfully get access to data from a voting machine in Coffee County. And these texts, 2 weeks after the breach happened, show you for the first time what they were planning to do with it. They were looking, it's very clear here. One text says, here's the plan. Let's keep this close hold for now. We only have until Saturday to decide if we're going to use this report to try to decertify the Senate runoff or if we hold it for a bigger moment later. Now, they're talking about the Senate runoff in Georgia, obviously the one that David Perdue, the Republican, lost, and it was won by Senator Jon Ossoff. But for the first time, we're getting a window into how people that were working for Trump in the lead up to in the aftermath of the 2020 election kept trying to do the same stuff weeks after.
So they keep going, even after January 6th. This is a conservative county, and this is part of a big, we always talk about the investigation by the DA in Fulton County is about the 2020 presidential race, but it's bigger than that.
It is bigger than that. I think what the DA is looking at there is really election interference, and this is part of it. We know that she has information about not only the attempts to breach these voting machines in Coffee County, but also the attempts to try to use these to undermine or to try to undermine the Senate runoff results as well as the 2020 presidential election results. And it's telling that, even after they saw how horribly it went trying to overturn the 2020 election, even after they saw what happened in January 6th, that there was still this kind of scheming going around in the layers around former President Trump at that time.
It's a very conservative county. So you would think if you're trying to prove fraud, why are you looking there? But is it because that's where they were able to get someone to help them get access? Is that this?
Exactly. They were able to find an election worker in Coffee County, which, as you mentioned, Trump won about 70% of the vote there. They were able to find an election worker who was sympathetic to some of the claims about, voting machine irregularities, that, they were potentially vulnerable to foreign hacking. And so they opened the front door and let this team of operatives in. That data was shared with a select group of Trump allies, and ultimately they were talking about whether or not to use it to try to upend the Senate runoff.
Right, and important to note, data that no member of the public should be able to touch, especially nobody with access to it, no one who's involved in a campaign with a partisan agenda should be able to touch.
Right.
Do we know where we're going here in terms of timetable?
Well, look, frankly, I think this is part of the reason the DA's investigation has taken so long is that as we peel back the layers in a state like Georgia, we're finding more and more about what happened. We knew Donald Trump called Brad Raffensperger. We knew Rudy Giuliani showed up and said crazy things to state lawmakers. But it was well after that that we learned about this breach in Coffee County, that we learned about sort of the gang of people involved in that. And we know she's looking at these potential racketeering charges. Maybe this spring. We're still waiting.
Right. For this to be happening even after January 6th just speaks volumes. Thanks to both of you for coming in to share that great reporting.